everybody. Welcome to week 2 of CIE 401 Globalization and Contextualization. We've got actually a lot of interesting stuff to cover this week, so let's jump right into it. First thing you'll notice that we have several different objectives ranging from sort of pros and cons of globalization to whether or not globalization is a Western phenomenon driven by Western ideology or if it's broader than that. We want to look at the ways that globalization both builds and destroys systems, education systems being a part of that. We want to think about the ways that globalization creates identity and organization, broadly speaking, in the world society, but again, we have an education lens on that. And we want to think about the role that NGOs play in the globalization or contextualization of education. So a lot of good points to move through this week. There are 4 learning modules for this preparation flipped content for the class. Remember that I want you to do the text reading before you watch the videos. So read part 1, all of part 1 of Debating Globalization. That will be all of these chapters here. It's about 50 pages, something like that. Maybe a little less. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you put together out of your readings and how you sort of come to the conclusions you come to. And then just start scrolling down. Remember, I want you to work through these pages top to bottom. So just start at the top and then move on down from there. Next, I have 2 little sort of summary sheets of some of the pros and some of the cons of globalization. Take a look at those because it's nice to get a sense for both the pros and the cons that are available. And when you're reading through these, again, nothing here is specific to education, but I want you to think about how these pros and how these cons can apply to education, even if it's not mentioned as a specific part of the text that's on these slides. In our next module, we're going to be thinking about what's right and what's wrong with globalization. And again, we're going to watch, I don't know how to say this, more videos of old guys, mostly old white guys. And again, these are the people who are talking about globalization that I think make a lot of sense. They're also a lot of the people that we're reading out of that part 1 of the globalization reader. So here we have Adrian Woolridge. You'll recognize him as one of the authors from chapter 1. Then we'll be looking at Amartya Sen, also one of the authors from a chapter in part 1 from our globalization reader. Then we will be looking at a video from Benjamin Barber, also one of the authors from part 1 of our globalization reader. And then we're going to move on to our 3rd module, World Society and Education, by first of all looking at actually a critique, very brief 2-minute critique, of Huntington's Clash of Civilizations. And so I'll be interested to see what you think about that. Moving on to a TED Talk by David Baker. You guys will be familiar with some of his work, professor at Penn State University. Does a lot related to world culture and world society and education. And then we'll finish up with this module, Who Needs an NGO? And that should be module 2.4, not 1.4. I'll fix that by the time you see this. Who Needs an NGO? You'll read the introduction from Sumeko's edited work, and then watch this video about a guy who actually had an NGO, and see what he says about the purpose of it. And I think this is interesting since I'm asking you to put together an NGO proposal as your final project for this class. We have to think about what we're doing and how do we do it in a way that makes sense, that isn't contributing to the cons of globalization while it maximizes the pros of globalization. All right. So come to class prepared to answer all of the questions at the end of part 1, Debating Globalization. That's in Lechner and Bolai, right at the end of part 1. The questions, this is the E version of the globalization reader. There are, it looks like 5 questions. Let's see. Yep, 5 questions. So take a look at all 5 of these questions, and they might look a little different in your version of the book. Just the formatting, and come with some idea about what the answers would be, but remember, how would you give these questions and your answers an education spin? That's going to be the important part of our conversation. And think about how the videos and the anything else that was from our preparation today, the readings themselves, influenced your answers to these questions. Next, I want you to come to class ready to discuss why we need or don't need more NGOs for education. You're going to be creating an NGO proposal, whether you like it or not. So you want to think about how can you do it in a way that avoids the cons and maximizes the pros. And then finally, remember, as part of your participation grade, you have to post comments or thoughts to each of the week's topics by the end of the day or the end of the week. Post your comments below in this fancy little place right here. All right? I'm looking forward to seeing you all in class, and hope that you have a great rest of your day, week, whatever.